Hello, and welcome to the Tangles and Toons channel. My name is David, and I'm here to guide you through another art session using Zentangle patterns. As you can see here on the screen, I'm working with an old school, or what I call an old school traditional tile. I started with the four corner dots and borders, and then here I've laid out a very basic grid pattern for my string, which creates the spaces where I place the tangle patterns. Now, another thing that's kind of old school about this is that I did not purposely or intentionally select the tangles. I used a random process where I rolled some dice and they represented page numbers in a book that I have with tangle patterns. And whatever pattern fell on that page, that's the one I use. And so I've rolled 5 different tangle patterns, not knowing exactly how the layout would turn out and having no planned composition whatsoever. I just began to draw these patterns in the way that you see here on your screen. Now this one is called Stricles by Zentangle, and it just is some random lines with then randomly placed circular patterns, and then we shade or ink in alternating ways to create this unique effect. And of course we'll shade everything at the end. This next pattern is called Munchin by Zentangle, and we start here with just some random dots. And then we draw a line and create perpendicular lines from one of the other points. And you'll see that pattern here repeated over and over. And the basic idea is, once we get that pattern started, that you never want to do those lines, or you want to try not to do the lines in the same direction. So you're always going to be running up against another line from a perpendicular perspective there. And so we just continue that process over and over, trying to alter the direction of those lines and where that center fan point is, if you will. And you just keep going around and around and around, and starting from each of those dots or going out to them, depending how you like to draw your pattern here. But that's basically the Munchin pattern. And you'll see here shortly in a moment that I have to add some additional dots to be able to complete the area on my tile where that pattern is being drawn. But there is no rule or set of requirements as far as how many and how large or in what direction you draw all of these patterns. I'm just doing it to fill that square area that my grid string has allowed for me. Now, as I'm drawing here in the background, I wanted to comment a little further on this traditional old school type of tangle. I don't know, many of my viewers have expressed that they're fairly new to Zentangle, and I'm not sure how everyone, what their first experiences of Zentangle are, and of course they're going to be different from one person to the next. But many of us, years ago when we started with Zentangle, it was a much simpler practice, and that was one of the great things that appealed to me about it. Now, when I say simpler, I don't mean that anything bad has happened to it now. It's just grown and evolved a little bit. But in the early days, it was just create space on a tile and fill that space with random patterns. There was no direct or immediate goal for a particular layout or a composition that was designed in a certain way, and the patterns didn't even have to make sense together. They didn't necessarily even have to overlap. Just like I've done here, I've kind of kept each tangle pattern in its own little world, so to speak, kind of following that grid. And then you just follow the step out for each individual tangle pattern. The step out meaning just how we draw a given pattern, or how the original artist has broken that down and created the step out, as it's called. And then we would follow that repeatedly to create the tangle pattern, which would fill that space. So it was very simple, very stress-free, and allowed the person doing it, myself in this case, to not be concerned about anything other than enjoying the process. And I didn't have to plan ahead where things would go. I didn't have to plan ahead what the composition would look like, what would be drawn under or below or above or beside the other. It just came together naturally as each pattern was encountered. And this really created some wonderful opportunities. Now, let's be honest, if you saw the thumbnail for this video as you clicked on it, you might have been thinking, that's kind of a strange looking tile. It's not very beautiful, David. It's not something that impresses me or makes me want to run out and put that on my wall in a frame. Well, let me just say I completely agree with you. This is not a terribly exciting or a terribly beautiful looking tangle or tile. However, even when we draw a Zentangle pattern that ends up not looking beautiful or not coming together in a way that's vibrant or imaginative, or the layout isn't super appealing, guess what? That's okay. Because no matter what the end result is, we still gain the experience and the benefit of the drawing process. And the drawing process always lends itself to us gaining experience and skill. And if nothing else, in that moment of the drawing, we gain an opportunity for mindfulness, for focusing on the exact task at hand, the repetition of the pattern, the inking of the pattern, the shading of the pattern. And all of those moments provide for us an opportunity to forget the cares of the day, to put aside what our next plan is, and to merely focus, to become mindful in what it is we're doing right there. And of course, as I said, we also gain the benefit of getting more skillful at drawing lines and curves, at inking and staying within a certain line or boundary. We start to see shapes and form in the different patterns that we do, and we start to learn more than what we set out to do. And that's sort of the invisible benefit, the unmeasurable benefit of drawing Zentangle or any form of art that we can do without stress and without the concerns of trying to follow endless rules. Zentangle is very open-ended, very free form, and as we've seen endless times even on this channel, we can modify, we can tweak, we can embellish, we can enhance any given tangle in any way we want. And some people modify and enhance a tangle so much it becomes unrecognizable as the original tangle, but that's fine. It still is a tangle pattern, a pattern that they can use, the artist can use to create pieces of art, whether they are beautiful, whether they are simplistic, whether they are abstract. They're always, when it comes to Zentangle, originally they were always designed to be non-representational. They weren't supposed to look like something. They weren't a picture of a bird or a drawing of your car or your house or anything like that. They were just shapes, patterns, some that were perhaps inspired by things in life, but they weren't always meant to look like realistic representations of those things. And so that, again, is the beauty to me of Zentangle. It provides opportunity for stress-free drawing, for mindful drawing, for focus on the task at hand, setting aside the cares of today or the concerns for tomorrow, and just focusing on the pure joy of creating something original with us. Even if we're following a pattern or a design that was created by someone else, the end result of what we draw is always uniquely our own. And that is really a wonder to me of any form of art. Well, I hope it doesn't seem as though I have tortured you a bit by repeating myself and being eternally redundant. That certainly was not my intention or design. But one of my goals has always been to teach people to appreciate art of any kind and to stretch their own limits by experiencing and trying different kinds of art whenever they can. Now, if you're content with a single type of art, then that's great. I would never try to dissuade you or talk you out of that. But I don't want you to limit yourself because you have a perception that that's what you need to do, or that until you're perfect at something, you shouldn't try anything else. That would simply be an unnecessary limit. And I don't want that for myself or for anyone. But let's focus back here on the finishing details of this drawing. As you can see here, I'm just adding shading to these different tangle patterns. And as always, there's no universal way to shade a tangle pattern because they're non-representational. So we can try to emphasize a certain shape or certain dimensionality or certain layers by the method that we use, and we can also try to enhance the overall drawing by adding little bits of tone. Now here I'm also adding some ink roundings to one of the shapes, the cogwheel shape, just to I'm doing it on the opposite side of the shading just to create a little more visual interest, hopefully. At least that was the goal, just a little more darkness, a little more contrast. And I liked the Munchin shape with all of its lines, the way it just sort of created a meta pattern almost, an intertwined sense of all those details that wouldn't have come out if I had tried to do it that way, but nevertheless, that's what happened. I also had selected an additional tangle pattern for this tile, but ended up not using it just because I ran out of space. But it was called Apicore, and I thought about drawing it separately on a little bijou tile. So that's what I ended up doing, just first time I had ever encountered this tangle, so I drew that. And it came out so wonky that I decided to just continue my sketching with a little toon. And you can see that he's just going to peek out at you here as I slowly reveal the silly face that I added to my first attempt at Apicore. But just like the toon is taking a look out at you, I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my videos here on the Tangles and Toons channel. So until next time, take care. Bye-bye.